Okay, I see quite a few participants here, but no messages, no chats are coming in. I hope everyone is able to access the feature. Anyway, we can get started with the session. We have a very super, informative next 1 hour planned for you. So please to stay tuned. Before we begin, couple of ground rules for the session. Oh, we are live on our social platforms as well. So we'll once again a welcome to everyone joining us on YouTube and LinkedIn. Yes. Okay, so a couple of ground rules for the session that we request everyone to follow. Number one, please drop any questions that you have in the Q&A box. You will be able to see the Q&A box in the navigation bar. Please click on that and drop us your questions. We might keep getting a lot of messages in the chat box. We might end up missing yours. So please use the Q&A box effectively. Any question that you want answered by the experts that we have here, please drop them in the Q&A box. Secondly, avoid sharing any external links or personal details in the chat box and keep conversations only relevant to the topic. And finally, if you would like an attendance or a participation certificate, please stay tuned till the end of the session. We will be launching a poll at the end of the webinar where you can enter your details for the attendance certificate. Okay. Great. So now let me start with welcoming and introducing the speakers for the session. First is we have Dr. Priyank Sinha. He is an assistant professor at IIT Bombay, IEOR, and his work sits at the intersection of fields that are uniquely combined in project management education, which is industrial engineering, supply chain analytics, and decision sciences. His research spans network optimization, applied probability, and logistics, and he's published in a lot of top academic journals. Professor, it is a pleasure to have you here. And let me also take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Satatru Chakrabarti. He is a program manager at IEOR. He spearheads the design, launch, and end-to-end delivery of certificate and EPGD courses. And he also has a PhD in chemical engineering, which from IIT as well. So he blends data-driven process improvements with compelling science communications to deliver high-impact learning experiences. It's once again a very warm welcome to both of you. It's great to have you here. It would be great if you can, if there's anything you want to add on to the introductions and say your hi to your participants, you can, Professor.
No, nothing to add from my side. Thank you, Ananya. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and let's get going. Let's start the webinar.
Okay, perfect. So here's a quick look at how we've structured the next 1 hour. We're going to move, we're going to cover quite a lot today. We'll start by, understanding IIT Bombay's educational outreach program, because understanding the institution behind this course will also be crucial. Then we'll move on to the problem statement, which is why do most project decisions fail at scale? From there, we get into the heart of today's conversation, the science of strategic project decisions, what frameworks, what tools, what mental models distinguish a great PM from a great strategic leader. We'll then deep dive into IIT Bombay's specific approach to teaching this, look at the curriculum and the applied projects you'll build, and close with what learning outcomes look like. There's a lot to cover and a lot to learn as well, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with a quick word about who's behind this program, which is IIT Bombay's Educational Outreach Division. No other, better than Dr. Satatru to take us through the details of this. Dr. Satatru, over to you.
Thanks, Ananya. So hello and good evening, everyone, and very nice to have you on board for this webinar, interactive webinar on strategic project management. So this is a course that we are, IIT Bombay is launching with Simplilearn, and I want to speak about the education outreach unit at IIT Bombay. So briefly, the educational outreach unit at IIT Bombay, its primary mandate is to, take the world-class excellence, educational excellence that IIT Bombay has, and spread it across and beyond its walls. It delivers, outreach education, executive educations, certificate courses, e-postgraduate diplomas, corporate training programs, capability building programs. All of these are under the mandate of the educational outreach. And in this regard, we have identified that project management, or strategic project management, as we call it, this is an important area, and we have esteemed faculty member, Dr. Priyank Sinha, who is an expert in this field. And with him, we have planned and designed this curriculum meticulously and to deliver to working professionals, as well as fresh graduates and people with work experience who want to upskill in the field of project management. So please feel free to visit the educational outreach office website, where you will get more such information, and looking forward to have a lot of participants coming for this current course. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satadru. I think that sets the context for this section perfectly. Okay, so let me start with a piece of news. According to a survey done by the Project Management Institute, $1 million is found to be wasted every 20 seconds by organizations worldwide because of poor project performance. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, here's what's even more striking. 85% of executive leaders surveyed believe their organizations are effective at delivering projects to achieve strategic results. 85%. There is a massive perpetual gap here. Leaders believe things are working, the numbers say something very different. So this disconnect between confidence and reality is one of the most important things today that we're going to explore. And it's not unique to one industry or one country. So we have Professor Priyank here, who is going to take us through the first two segments, where we are going to discuss the science behind strategic project decisions. Professor, we just saw one striking data point already regarding the project failures. So what is your take on this? You can, over to you. You can continue forward with the session.
Okay, thanks, Ananya. So there are two primary reasons for it. The first one is that the projects are usually one-off undertakings. Usually, if we want to compare a project with a standard industrial environment, we come across the industrial products which have some sort of a repeatability in the process. And so the same kind of a product is being produced in an industrial environment. But when we look at the project, so projects are mostly unique in nature. So even when we feel that a same sort of for example, a same sort of a bridge is being constructed and so on, but still the projects that two projects will be quite different, because there will be different stakeholders that will be coming in, the infrastructure, the total environment that will be there. So one aspect is that projects are the unique endeavor, so it is very difficult to anticipate and control the strategic variables associated with the project. And during the planning phases, these variables are very uncertain, and there is no historical data which could be used in order to estimate those problem parameters. The second aspect is something which we can control. Because what we tend to do in the standard conventional project management courses is that we focus too much on the execution part. The other thing is that we try to do the planning of the project management through some very basic standard logical models, and some qualitative models, which tend to ignore the uncertainties that are associated with the decision making in the initial phases. And it also tend to ignore the interdependencies between the stakeholders and the processes. So these models are not very exhaustive, they are not very comprehensive, which can actually completely digest the complexities of the project. So because we tend to use these simpler models, so there is usually a cascading effect which happens in the later part of the project, where we see these kind of a failure. So these failures are not anecdotal in any sense. They are systematic failures, if I can say that, because due to the poor planning, these failures are cascaded. So there is this second aspect is something which we can control by better theory and better practice of the project management, and that is what we'll try to do over here in this course. So more specifically, we can look at the root causes here. So for example, if I were to, speak more specifically about the issues. So the first one is that risk treated as a register item and not as a strategic variable. So what we mean to say here is that even when we recognize that there is a risk associated with completing a particular stage of the project, so it is usually recorded as a register item. It means that we just record it for the purpose of recording it, that there is a risk associated with this, but we don't tend to model that risk into our planning phases. So the models are not good enough to incorporate the risk in their totality. How the risk can be incorporated into those models, that is something which we need to look at. The other thing is decision framed around optimism bias and not probabilistic thinking. So even when we say that for example, if we say that the cost of a particular activity is expected to have some probability distribution, still we tend to, for our simplistic analysis, we tend to ignore the variance of the distribution, and we tend to assume that the most likely cost of a particular activity is something what we are going to realize. So we are more optimistic about the problem parameters values rather than be more realistic and think in terms of probabilistic modeling. So that is another reason. Then trade-off blindness when the scope, cost, and the benefit objectives compete. This is an important thing because mostly in a very generic way, the projects can be, so there are three type of performance measures that we can talk about for any project. So there is a cost dimension, there is a scope dimension, and there is basically the quality dimension, if you can say. So usually it happens that these dimensions have a trade-off between each other. So if I want to increase the scope of the project, it will only happen if I increase some cost, right? So if I'm tending to, so sometimes if there is a cost overrun, so I tend to reduce my cost without realizing that if I will try to reduce my cost in the later phases of the project, it would lead to the reduction in the scope also. So this trade-off is not always realized by the project manager, and it is not very meticulously, incorporated in the modeling. The fourth one is the absence of the system level visibility in the cross-functional program. So rarely it will happen that organization will only be undertaking a single project. So usually a portfolio of the projects is undertaken. So the problem reduces to the resource allocation across different of these projects, and the standard project management approach is to only look at a single project. So we tend to, so there is a project manager assigned to a particular project, and the standard project management approach is that we tend to improve the performance of a single project, but we don't have a system level thinking where we say that how the performance of one project is going to affect the performance of others and how these things are interrelated. So that is also a very important reason. And as we see, the project organizations are becoming more and more complicated. So this particular point is becoming more paramount. The fifth one is stakeholders forecast and the business cases built to win approval, not reflect reality. And this is a very practical standpoint. So whenever, let us say, even within the organization, there are two teams. Let us say there is a quality team, and let us say there is a IT team. So IT team wants to implement a IT project, and the quality teams wants to implement a quality improvement program. Now, both the team wants to win a project tender. So what they will tend to do is they will try to overstate the project outcomes that will be achieved by the quality team or by the IT team, just so that they can win over the project. So the idea is that when we start the project, we start with more unrealistic outcomes that it is expected to achieve, and this is only realized as we proceed further in the project. And then sometimes because of this reason, we have to abandon the project when we see that there is not much of a strategic alignment and much of the value which is expected to be achieved from the project. Yeah, Ananya, you can change the slide. So yeah, so what we'll try to focus here is that the execution focus project management and the strategic leader. So it can be it can be well understood by these examples that are given here. So let us say there is a milestone slip in the project. What a milestone slip means that let us say there are certain stages of the project has been achieved, and after a particular stage, let us say that certain milestones would have been expected to achieve. So the milestone could be in terms of the quality, it could be in terms of the cost, it could be in terms of the scope that has been achieved. Now, more frequently, what will happen in many stages, the projects will miss a milestone. So, execution focused project management would say that how do we recover the schedule, because we are too much focused on actually honoring the schedule. So, if there are some schedule overruns in the initial stages of the project, we'll try to recover it in the later stages. That becomes our core objective. However, the strategic viewpoint of this entire problem would be to diagnose that why does this slip actually happen? What does this slip signal tell us about the original assumptions that we made about the project, and whether this slip signal is can be used to predict that how my next stages of the project are expected to pan out. So based on that, we are trying to take a more holistic and a strategic decision, not just trying to stick to the schedule. So for example, the other example is the budget is overspent. So if there is, let us say, a cost overrun. So the idea is that if there is a cost overrun, can we cut the scope so to recover the cost overrun that we have already had in the initial stages of the project? The strategic viewpoint of this problem would be whether the original budget is still a right constraint, right? So for example, let us say as we go through the project, we realize that the value that I expected out of that project, now the value is basically better for a particular project, because projects are a large undertaking and they span for about sometimes 10 to 15 years also. So let us say you are in the middle of the project delivery and you realize that the total value of the project is more. So then you will not be focused too much about the cost overruns. Then you will say that even if the cost overruns continue to happen in the later stages also, still the project has a good amount of value. So instead of trying to stay within the envelope, I'm always going to evaluate that whether a larger value can be created, and if it is can be created, then probably cost overrun is not going to matter much for me. So for example, a stakeholder pushes back. So this is one another viewpoint of the project management, where we say that for a project there are different stakeholders which come together to execute a particular project. Now each of these stakeholders have their have their local objectives to be fulfilled, right? Now as the project proceeds, some of the stakeholders might realize that the project is not fetching the kind of a value which they actually thought it would, right? So what they will do is they will start resisting, right? So there will be a pushback from the stakeholder side, and what the operations view, if the project manager is keeping an execution focus, so they will try to manage that resistance, try to tell the people that okay, in the maybe in the later stages there will be a more strategic alignment, so you can stick to the schedule of the project. So the idea is just to do the firefighting here. What a strategic viewpoint of the project of this particular problem would be, what does this resistance tell us about the whose interest is the project actually serving? So probably as we proceed further, so we might realize that the project is now actually serving the strategic objectives of very small number of stakeholders. So probably a strategic realignment needs to be done. So an execution focused project management will not focus on their strategic realignment. Finally, if let us say a new opportunity arises, the execution focused project management is simply going to ignore, because that is going to be out of the scope. But a strategic focus or a focused project management will say that if there is an additional opportunity, then what is the additional cost of pursuing it? And if there is a value in it, so even after the project is started to implement, still we can change the scope, still we can change the schedule. So this is the basic difference between an execution focused project management and a strategic leader. So these two are the different approaches to the project management. As you can easily see that the strategic focus project management is more useful when we take the entire projects as holistically, right? Okay, so next slide. Yes, so this is just a. So I think we have some question from. So Puneet, do you have any question? We have something in chat, or I can just continue. Okay, anyways. Right. So this is just a very simple, a broad level flow of how strategic decisions are made in the project management. So first we do the decision gate analysis. So what is basically a decision gate? We'll talk more about this in the course, but the idea here is very simple, that there are certain critical junctures of the project, right? So when you arrive at that juncture, you tend to reassess your project deliverables. You tend to see that what is the total cost that you have incurred, what is the total value that you have created. So whether there have been any cost overrun, whether you have been able to achieve actually the amount of value that you wanted to, right? So decision gate analysis actually tells you, it is a strategic points where we need to re-evaluate the project, that whether, and sometimes it happens that at a decision gate we realize that probably the project is not fetching us some good value, so it is a good idea to either halt the project or completely dump it. So that is the idea behind the decision gate analysis. And then we have something called, which is the fuzzy logic or the expert system. So sometimes it happens that, let us say that you want to talk about the stakeholder influence, you want to quantify stakeholder influence. And let us say there are three categories. The stakeholder influence is either high, it is medium or low in a particular project, right? So as you start now, since the projects are one-off activities, and once you start with the project, there is a very little information that is available to you. So even you don't have a very complete information of what a particular stakeholder influence would be in a project, whether it would be a high, it would be medium, it would be low. So a non-fuzzy approach to this problem would be that you have to very strictly classify the stakeholder influence either into these three categories. A fuzzy approach to this problem would be that I can define the membership function, where it can say that the strategic influence for a particular stakeholder influence, sorry, for a particular stakeholder is 0.7 in the high and 0.3 in the medium, right? So it is a fuzzy way of categorizing and giving a quantitative figure to the stakeholder influence. As we proceed further, as we get more and more information, we can more precisely define these problem parameters, stakeholder influence in this case. The idea here is that once we start integrating start integrating the modeling frameworks of the project management with a fuzzy approach, we tend to address these kind of issues where the uncertainties are present. We also tend to use expert systems. So expert systems are, in a very crude sense, they are the precursors to the AI ML based method. So basically, when we talk about AI ML, they basically tend to learn from the data from they tend to learn the functional relationship between the variables from the data. Uh, in contrast, when we talk about the expert system, these are the rule-based systems. So it says that if something happens, if this is the condition, then this is the decision that you are required to take, right? So an integration of the fuzzy logic and the expert system actually creates a scenario where the variables, where the actual impact of the different variables can be mapped as we go throughout the project execution phase. Then we have the Monte Carlo simulation and the probabilistic scheduling. Most of the network representation of the scheduling would assume that either the activities, the different tasks that are to be undertaken in the project, either their duration is known with certainty, or there is a probabilistic distribution which would describe that what is the probability that a particular activity can be completed in a specific duration. We have certain standard methods to account for the probabilistic distribution of the activity duration and the and the deterministic value of the activity duration. But the problem here is that when we even use the probabilistic value, we tend to focus more on the expected value. So the simulation method basically allows us to use this probability distributions of the different activities and then generate thousands and sometimes thousands and millions of those instances, right? And each instance will tell you that for a particular given set of different activities, depending upon the probability, of course, what will be the total duration of the project and whether a particular activity will be a critical activity or not. So once you have many number of instances, through the statistical analysis, it becomes easy for you to correctly estimate that what is the likelihood that a particular activity will be a critical activity, or what is the probability that the project will be completed in the particular duration time, right? So the advantage of this kind of a method is that we have a more reasonable estimate of what activities are the critical, and so our focus on the critical activities become better because we are less expected to change our focus to the non-critical activity while we start executing the project with this kind of a modeling approach. Then we also have ML-based forecasting and the earned value management. So there are many methods, mostly Bayesian methods, which are currently being experimented with, where we can use these methods to have the more reliable duration and the cost estimation of the different project. And then these kind of methods are very much used, they're supplemented with the earned value management, where at different stages we tend to find out that what is the value that each stage of the project is basically creating, because there is a cost also associated with executing the activity. So that kind of a comparison can be easily done. Yeah. Next slide. Ananya. Hi, sir. Okay, so I can take this question. So Abhishek says that, hi, sir, I'm Abhishek. Is 80-20 rule also work in P? 80-20 rule will always work in, I mean, most of the industry setups. Yes, it will work. Definitely, it will work in different aspects. So you can say that application would be the 80% of the uncertainties in the activity duration would be due to the 20% of the factors. So in those cases, it will work. And then there could be other instances also where this 80-20 rule will work. Yeah. Okay, so this is just a very brief snapshot of how the certificate course differentiate itself with a typical short-term PM course. So on the dimension of the depth, right? So since the if the total duration of the courses is small, then the course will usually focus more on the tools, right? And some industry use cases and so on. Since what we are proposing here is a longer course, so here we will more talk about the theoretical stuff, right? So our objective in this course is basically to develop a theoretical intuition for the participants. So the idea is that even if, let us say, you encounter a situation where a particular model cannot be directly applied, so a model which has been discussed in this course, so at least you have a theoretical intuition that why this model would have worked in a particular situation and why this model does not work in this situation, and whether I can extend this basic model to address a particular context that I am currently in. So the theoretical intuition that this course tends to develop has a far more far-reaching consequences when it comes to your ability to apply these methods to the actual scenarios. The duration is usually 2 to 4 days for the typical short project management courses. Here it is 5 months. It is more structured across the 6 modules. Then the short-term project management courses we usually are delivered through experiential learning, because we have the industry personas who have been into this project management for a very long time. So they would share their experiences, and that also has its benefit. But at least, I mean, the academicians would always argue that the experiential learning has its importance, but it only has its importance if you have a good, fair understanding of the theory, right? So we assume that most of the participants who would be, coming here would want actually to brush up their theories in the project management. So in that sense, it would be helpful for the participants. So AI integration, since the short-term PM courses don't have much bandwidth to discuss these things, some of the contemporary developments that are happening in the project management in detail. But here, when we talk about this particular course, we can discuss some of these developments in more detail. So I must give a caveat here, because there is a scarcity of the data, and most of the AI ML based methods require a huge amount of data in order to train the models, right? And since the projects are one-off undertakings, so data might be scarce. So there are many methods which are currently being experimented in order to improve the decision making, and with some, of course, with some limited success. So we are typically going to discuss those cases in much more detail, and with a small data set, I can demonstrate how some of these methods are being applied to the different aspect of project management. Credentials, they are training completion certificate, and for this course, you will get a IIT Bombay certificate, which will be issued by the institute itself. Right? Okay. Next. Yeah. Okay, so this is basically the 6 module learning path here. So in the first module, we talk about so this is broadly what we'll cover in the course. So strategic foundation of project leadership. So here what we tend to do is, since we tend to treat the projects as we try to draw parallels between the project environment and the industrial environment. So what we tend to do is we try to look at the projects from the systems point of view, and we try to see that how we can improve the overall efficiencies of the project. So this is much more similar to what we do in the industrial engineering. So we, from the industrial engineering perspective, we try to look at the processes, at the entire some process from the system point of view. So this is exactly what we do over here. So in the realms of the project management, when we do that, we are looking at the entire project from a more holistic point of view, and we tend to call it as a strategic project management. We tend to see that how different projects can come together. So we tend to do some sort of a so we tend to discuss some of the models where we say that whether a particular project is aligned to the strategic objectives of the organization, and the organization should only undertake the projects which are well aligned to the strategic objects. So these are some of the things that we will look at in this module. We will study the models associated with it. Then what we'll do is we will do the advanced project evaluation and the prioritization. So let us say that we have shortlisted certain projects which we feel that are reasonably aligned strategically to the organization goals. Within those projects, we try to do the project evaluation and prioritization. Prioritization is required because every organization will have limited number of resources, and sometimes we have to allocate the resources, and if the resources are scarce, then we have to prioritize certain projects which tends to maximize the overall strategic objectives of the organization. So we'll study the models related to this, which are avidly used for the project evaluation and the prioritization. Then we will discuss certain models which are used for the integrated scheduling and dependencies. We are going to look at the integrated models when it comes to the when we have this approach where multiple projects are being undertaken simultaneously. So how there are interdependencies between the project, and we are also going to look at the models which are typically used for managing a singular project, right? So those kind of modeling aspects will be discussed in this module. Then finally, once we have the schedules and the dependence relationships already with us, then what we tend to do is we plan for the resources and we do the budgeting governance. So here we tend to look at some of the models which are also used for the resource leveling and so on. And then finally, we look at, so after this, what happens is that once the budget is allocated, then there are certain aspects where we like to certain models which are used for the project execution and control. So those things will also be discussed within this module. And then finally, we are going to discuss more contemporary things. For example, how the complex project ecosystems are evolving, where there are larger and larger projects. There are more and more complex teams, and there are many stakeholders. So the idea is that the models to the models which will be used to model the interdependencies and model the uncertainties within the project needs to be more exhaustive and needs to be uh, more encompassing in some way, right? So we will try to discuss that what are the developments in the field, development in the domain of these modeling aspects that can be used for the complex project ecosystem. And finally, we will also discuss about, we'll also undertake a capstone project where whatever learnings we have had so far in all the earlier modules can be applied to a real project-based study so that you understand how these different models and different frameworks are basically applied to the actual scenario. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, so these are some of the case studies, and these case studies are discuss some of the contemporary, developments that are happening in the project management. And these are the case studies which are for focusing on the AI ML aspects of the project management. So we have the case studies like ML enabled litigation outcome prediction. So if there is some litigation, if there is some conflict between the stakeholders. So what is the expected outcome? Depending upon that outcome, you can continue to dedicate the resources to a particular project, or you can just halt and so on. That is a basic idea. There is AI ML based cost estimation. This case study, there is a case study on ML based project duration estimation. Sorry. There is a case study on ML enabled earned value management, fuzzy rule based expert system for construction project, future of AI ML in project management, and the integrated capstone project. Okay. So these are the hands-on project and the case studies that will be covered. Okay, so learning outcome and who this is for. So ideally, the end result of this course is what we see is that you all the participants attending this course must be able to develop theoretical intuition towards the decision making in project management. Of course, in any given course, you cannot discuss all the models that are available, but the idea is that once you discuss the basic models and once you have the understanding that how to explore other models if they can be used, then you can basically use that knowledge to attack any real world project management problem. So the skills, if we were to drill down on the skills, so these are the list of the skills that we expect that you will have by the time you complete this particular course. Yeah. Uh, next slide, Ananya. Okay, so what you will be able to do after this program? This is a brief snapshot. So apply ML and fuzzy logic to forecast project outcomes and classify stakeholders quantitatively. Then design decision gates framework using NPV, CBA, and the strategic value metrics. So these are some of the metrics which are used at the decision gate. So once I encounter a decision gates, I'm going to evaluate the performance of the project across these important metrics. Then build probabilistic risk models to bound uncertainty and inform go and no-go calls. So the idea is that if you have a no-go call, it means the project has become too risky and we should probably not continue with it. So there is a no-go and go gate that we have at the strategic points. We evaluate project against ESG and the sustainability frameworks, not just financial returns. So that is something which is coming up in a big way, and all the major projects need to comply with some sustainability requirements, and what is the performance of the project against the ESG. So that is something which is very much a part of the project reporting, if the project is to be considered successful. Then use AI enhanced EVM to monitor the program health predictively, not reactively, right? And lead cross-functional teams through ambiguity with behavioral and the governance tool. So these are some of the things that we expect the learners as a takeaway from this course. Next slide. Okay, so these are the career trajectories that we think. So the way we have structured this course, I think since we are more relying on the modeling aspects of the project management, so we expect that even somebody who is quite new to the field of project management would also benefit, because even if they don't have much of the experience, but if let us say that you have been into this field for a long time and you have good experience, and this course is definitely going to uh, definitely give you a better outcome in terms of the theoretical underpinnings, and then you can use these theoretical things complemented with your experience to take better and better decisions, right? So these are some of the career trajectories. So for example, you can become a program director or the PMO head. You can become a portfolio strategy manager, because the task of the portfolio strategy manager is to look at the portfolio of the different projects, because the focus, the very prevalent idea in the project management is that the way the strategic decisions are taken in any organization is very much dependent upon the type of the projects that it basically undertakes. You could become an infrastructurer or EPC project leader. You could become a technology transformation lead, and definitely you can be a part of a strategic and operation consultancy also, because the huge amount of work is done in that space. Yeah. So next slide. So these are the the segments of the professionals that we are targeting. So mid to senior project and the project managers. So if you have 5+ years of experience and without any very good theoretical grounding. So let us say that you got into this field without a very good theoretical grounding. So definitely you will find this course to be useful, because you will be able to use the theory with your experience in order to catapult your career further. Engineers and the technical leaders also will find this course to be very good, because as you undertake, as you plan to aspire to take more strategic positions, so you will have to handle bigger and bigger projects, and definitely the strategy and the consulting professionals. So these are the different segment of the professionals whom we think that are going to be benefiting from this course. Yeah. So next slide. So I think Ananya, you can take it from here. So towards the end of this presentation, you can just I think not even towards the end of the presentation, you can start putting your question in the chat box. So we'll take it up towards the end, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So Ananya, over to you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for all the explanation. Like you said, if any of the participants have any questions, please feel free to let us know in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will answer that very shortly. So let me quickly take you through the admission process. It's pretty straightforward and designed to be fast as well. There are simply 4 steps. You start by submitting an application through Simplilearn, where you'll fill in your professional background and your objectives for the program. Step 2 is a profile review by the admissions team from IIT Bombay. They will be evaluating your experience, your eligibility, and fitment. Step 3 is the admission decision, which comes within 7 to 10 business days. And step 4 is enrollment and orientation after you complete your fee payment. please do note that the seats are limited. This is not like a mass enrollment module. It's a very curated cohort, and which is what makes the learning environment more fruitful to everyone. So, if you have plans to consider this program, please do take your action as at the earliest possible. And yes, let me take just a moment to tell you about us, about Simplilearn, the delivery partner for this program. Simplilearn is one of the world's leading online learning platforms. We've advanced over 8 million careers across 150 plus countries, and we've done it through more than 50 global partnerships with institutions exactly like IIT Bombay. We've been recognized as a top 20 online learning company 3 years running and have won multiple Stevie Awards for sales and customer service. What this means essentially is that the infrastructure, the environment around your learning, the platform, the support, the session management, all of this will be world class. And yes, what we're really proud of is how our programs have impacted our learners. We have a more than 80% graduation rate, with learners rating our programs 4.8 on 5 and reporting a 50% salary hike on average. And this really shows the kind of learning experience and dedicated guidance that we've been able to provide to millions. And yes, if you are interested further, here are the program investment details. For Indian learners, the fee is 1,50,000 rupees with monthly installments starting at just 6,716. For learners from the USA, the fee is $1,640 with installments starting at just $164 a month. For our audiences from other parts of the world, you can find the exact fee in your local currency on the program page. I'm going to share that in the chat box right here. And yes, if you want more details on the program, if you want to look into the curriculum in detail, or you want to talk to any one of our expert advisors, please do scan this QR code. You will get all the details. Yes, so we've discussed a lot about the program already, but let me just quickly highlight the best things. It's a live online interactive format of classes from IIT Bombay's top faculty. You will be getting a prestigious IIT Bombay certification. This will be a chance to go beyond PMP certification and make like more strategic impact. And you will also be getting Simplilearn's AI-powered job assistance, which includes like one-on-one mock interviews, job opportunities, etc. And you will also be getting LinkedIn profile and resume optimization as part of Simplilearn's job assist. Great. So if you've ever been in a meeting where you struggle to make your point because you lacked data-backed narratives, or if you want to enhance your decision-making skills using AI and ML, or if you imagine yourself not just managing projects but steering towards success with strategic insights and leadership, this is a chance to take the next step in your career and truly make an impact. So with that, I'm going to launch a poll to take your interest in enrolling in the program. All you have to do is click on yes or no. Even if you have any queries, you need more details, you need more time to think, you can click on yes, because our expert advisor will be getting in touch with you and guiding you forward. And in case you're voting no, please do let us know the reason in the chat. We would like to understand better on what's holding you back as well. Okay, so I'm gonna have that poll on for a little while. Okay, so Professor, I'll read out a couple of questions that have come our way. Okay, what will be the impact of AI in project management in the coming years?
So, I don't think it will be a very massive one, unless and until we. So, I'll tell you what kind of models are currently being experimented on. So, mostly these models are Bayesian based models. So, the idea is that we start with a particular estimate of the problem parameters, and as we proceed further uh, in the project, we get more and more information, and that information can be used to predict the parameters now more precisely. That is one aspect, but at the onset, because of the unique nature of the project, you cannot simply apply many of these methods that are many of the standard methods, because they rely too much on the historical data, and we assume that much of the project activities that we are going to see for any project are going to be non-repetitive in nature. But yes, when it comes to the estimation, these methods are more generic in nature. They assume there is less of the assumption, and they provide us with the more flexibility in the modeling. So in that sense, they are being used. And so there are definitely uh, some success, but I don't see that it is going to radically completely change the project management field. It is ultimately going to be very much focus on the standard models with some enhancements, and then experiential learning is also very much important for becoming a successful project. That is something which will be always be there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We have a question in the chat box from Praveen. He says PMP certificate is widely recognized across the globe. Will IITB certificate has that level of acceptance? It's not that he's doubting the institute, but he just wants to understand the global recognition possibilities of the certificate.
So, see, the first thing is that obviously when you look at the acceptability of this certificate, obviously it is not as good as the PMP certificate that you talked about, and there are other certifications also in the project management. What we are currently focusing on is not the certificate. Certificate is one aspect. The other thing is that we want to focus more on the theory, and in our initial discussions also, we saw that some of the things that are taught in these certifications, we will like to enhance them in a better way, to see that what are the contemporary things that are happening in the data field of data analytics application to the project management. So it is more of a, you can say, learning focus certification, and in that sense, yeah. But when it comes to more acceptability, so obviously the PMP certificate will be more widely acceptable and recognized, unless and until we get to that level.
Okay, thank you, Professor. With that, I'm going to end the poll for dropping your interest to enroll in the program. We do have a couple more questions and we will take that. And yes, if anyone has any more questions, please do drop them in the chat box or the Q&A box. I'm also going to launch another poll for those of you who need attendance certificate for participating in the session. Please do enter your full name that you want on the certificate. We will be able to generate and share it with you on email within the next 48 working hours. Meanwhile, a couple more questions, Professor, that have come our way. Let me just read that out. Okay. For learners who have not used technical tools such as Python before, how does this course support building those skills from the ground up?
So first of all, the way we approach in this course, so it will not involve to any coding of that sort. So even if there is some Python implementation, we can very easily use the generative AI, unless if we have a fair understanding of the model. So I can show you how to use any basic model in the generative AI to generate the code, and then you can just paste it in the Python to get the result. But the idea is that once you have a fair understanding of the model, then you can use your generative AI better in order to generate the corresponding code for a particular model. So we are not going to focus anything actively on the coding, because the basic coding that this course may require can be very easily generated by the generative AI tools.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, 1 second. Okay. Will this program be useful for someone in a core operations role?
Depends. Totally depends. So, for example, even in the core operation industrial environment, you tend to undertake a lot of projects. So, for example, let us say that you are launching a new product. So, launching a new product into the market itself can be seen as a project. So, let us say that you want to have a technological, upgradation. Let us say that you want to have a, sort of a industry 4.0 implementation in your factory, right? So, that is also a project, right? So I cannot think about any industry or any aspect where project management will not play a active role unless and until it is very stagnant in nature. So these days markets are rarely any industry is very stagnant, and no matter where you are, you will always have to undertake some projects. So that is one aspect, but it is not necessary that you will be involved into that undertaking. But definitely the manufacturing industry also has a lot of project application.
Okay, perfect. There is another question on the difference between PMP certification and project management course from IIT Bombay. I think we've covered this in one of the slides, Professor. So up to you if you want to take this question and summarize
No, I
and
can take.
answer.
I
You
can
can.
take. I can take. So we have looked at the PMP course, and we want to cover most of the aspects of the PMP, and over and above that, we want to cover certain other aspects also. So our focus, our effort would be to already cover the things that are covered with the PMP with some added flavor. We try to do.
Okay, perfect. I see one question regarding the schedule of the program. We do have a cohort starting very shortly, so you can check that out in the program page. If you want like a cohort that works according to your timeline, you can also talk to the talk to our expert who will be able to guide you with the timelines and the details of the schedules, etc. So I hope that question is answered. Okay, so Praveen has another question. For the AIML module, will there be any demo or hands-on demo work is what he's asking.
What does that mean? So what we'll try to do is that, see, the AI ML implementation in project management has not become very standard. As I said that there are certain experiments which we are conducting. So how I want to cover these implementation is by discussing certain case studies. And yes, I can take some small numerical examples just to show how it will be worked in a real life instance. So we can have a small data set and we can, work around with that data set to just, those things can happen. Yeah. But it will be my major focus will be to discuss that case study and less on the, this hands-on thing. But yes, that will be anyways a part of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Professor. And yes, with that, I'm going to end the poll for the certificate as well. Right. So we are at the end of the session now. If anyone has any question that we were not able to address in the webinar, or you want to share any feedback, please do write to us at webinars@simplilearn.net. Professor Priyank, thank you so much for being here and your guidance and sharing your knowledge and insights for the last 1 hour. It's been a pleasure hosting you. Do you have any final remarks to share, any advice for our learners?
No, nothing for us.
Okay. So to all the participants, thank you very much for spending the last 1 hour with us. We hope that you'll be able to apply the learnings from the session as well as what you'll get from the strategic project management program to get ahead in your career. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.